So, Cesario, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being over here, and thank you for your time. I know you're a busy guy. So, maybe we can start with a brief introduction of who is Cesario, right? Could you tell us a little about your story? Where were you born, and how did you get into Agile world, right?
Okay. I was born in the Netherlands, which is a very small country, far, far away from Mexico, actually, in a small town, Hengelo. And I studied mathematics and computing science. So I rolled into software development late 90s and got very enthusiastic about extreme programming in the late 90s. People like Kent Beck and Uncle Bob, and I started working with teams. And in 2003 or 4, there was this person called Ken Swaber who gave a course in Amsterdam, a certified Scrum Master course, and I went there, and it was amazing. It was just super cool and super inspiring to see that, and it was a great fit to use that on top of XP. And from then on, it just went on from that. You see, I started working with more teams, and teams became departments, and then eventually it became working with whole organizations on implementing their, improving their business processes, actually. And of course, the main driver was Scrum and Agile thinking. And yeah, I got into conferences. I got into all this Agile community, which is super exciting still after so many years. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. You also have written some books, right? Could you tell the audience how is this triggered? Like you're one day just doing some agile stuff, and then you say, "I want to write a book," right? I think that you have three, right?
I have, yeah.
So how does this start, right? What's the trigger, and what is your creative process? Like you have a lot of notes, and then you start putting in
Okay.
some kind of index, or how do you work on each of the books? If you can tell us a little story about them, right?
I can. So for each one, for each book, it was different. So the first one is called Emergent, and this is from 2013 or something, the first release. And this was out of people. So companies asking me, so we want to work with you. I was an independent consultant by then. They started asking me, okay, we want to work with you, but what's your plan? So what are you going to do then? So how are you gonna, what are the steps? What's your approach? And I had to write all these like proposals with steps, and then 6 months later I had to write the same one. So I copy pasted it and changed some things, and from that, it gave me the idea, well, what about if I could write that down? If I could write the approach down in the book, and I can just then give the customers the book, and then, this is how I work. And I was thinking about that, and that was the initial idea, to say, well, let's write this small book, Emergent. It became 250 pages or something eventually. But the main driver was, I just want to have a document that I can then give to people, to customers in this case, and it describes how I work. And yeah, it got out of hand, of course. It ended up in 250 pages, summarizing a lot of the blogs and a lot of the articles I wrote over the years. So that would be the first one. And then the second one was
the audience. Before jumping to the next one, who would be the best audience for this one? Like, I want to buy this book because I need.
Okay. So this book gives an overview of how you can plan and how you can run a agile adoption. So the audience would be middle managers, maybe some senior managers, but middle managers, let's say agile coaches that work with many teams. So this is not for one team. This is if you work with a department or with a large product group, then this could be very useful. Yeah, so that would be the main audience there.
Okay.
And then there's this second book, which is I'm a co-author of. It's called a Scrum book, and that one took around 10 years to write.
Wow.
And with lots of people, some very famous people, like in Scrum world famous, like Jeff Sutherland and Mike Beadle, and many others that I don't want to mention all. So we were around 12 or 13 people, and this consisted of people from, like, let's say, semi-academic profession to people like me, like doing real coaching work on a daily basis. And these were people from all over the world, from Australia, from United States, from, I don't know, Portugal, from Holland, from Denmark, and so on. And we got together every year for a week, and we exchanged and discussed patterns that we wrote, and these were Scrum patterns, like, and a pattern is a thing that must be seen 3 times in practice and by individual people being applied. So we extracted all that information from all over the world and wrote it in a format called a pattern. A format, so that you can easily read that and then apply it to your own context. And we wrote 94 of those, but it took 10 years to write. And I think I'm very enthusiastic about that one. Also, it's a very, very nice book. It's not easy to read, but it's very useful if you are working with teams, working with organizations, and you want to improve. You can find many, many sources there of inspiration.
Would you say this is a book for teams that are already doing Scrum that want to get to a better level, or for teams that are starting?
I would say that it's for both. It's for both. Yeah.
Okay.
If you just start out, it provides you languages, as we call them, pattern languages, from which you can derive sequences of patterns, which would be a plan for you to step by step implement Scrum or build your value stream or build your product organization in a way that is based on real experience, real problems, and real solutions. So it's very useful in that way. And if you already have a configuration, you already have a way of working, you can use it to point out, to discover where you can still improve, where things are still lacking, where you can add and improve. So it's actually very useful for both. It's been written in a way to be useful in both of these situation. Yes.
Got it. And you have another one, right?
Yeah, and then the last one just came out last year, which is called Creating Agile Organization. And this one is for more for senior managers who want to really do a transformation. It has a lot of weight on organization design, agile organization design specifically, and for the people, the transformation leads or the agile coaches that really work at the more overall organizational level, and they want to, transform this organization into an agile one. This book I co-wrote with a friend of mine, Ilya Pavlichenko, and it's I'm very happy about that. We're providing some courses also about the book, design course and a coaching course, which actually mimics the 2 parts of the book. The first part is more conceptual. It's about agile organization design and all its details, and then there's a second part which is more operational. It's more about how to actually do it, with lots of examples and lots of workshop formats you can try, and the courses mimic those.
Awesome. That sounds good. We will put over there in the description the link to the books, so you're able to grab them over there. So thank you for sharing about the book, Cesario. Now I have a bunch of questions over here to talk about Agile. Maybe we can share some concepts with the audience, right? So the first one would be, I really like asking these ones. So how would you explain this? What is Agile to a 10-year-old kid, right? In your words.
To a 10-year-old kid, Agile, explaining Agile. So my kids are already a bit older, but I tried. So I would say, well, Agile is, so now we have to let's assume Agile is the manifesto here. Let's assume that's what we mean by Agile. Then I would say something like, if you want to, I don't know, build a Lego house that your friends really like, then one way to do it is the Agile way. And the Agile way would mean that you would build a little bit of it and then show it to your friends, to your friends or in school, and see what they like about it, what they don't like about it, and then what they like about you then focus on that and build more of that. And then after maybe 30 minutes of playing, you ask again, and then you collaboratively with your friends make using the enthusiasm of your friends, you make your Lego castle that you like, but also your friends really like. I would nice. Explain it something like that. Yeah.
That's great. That reflects most of the concepts behind Agile, right? Constant feedback, collaboration, motivation. So I really like the example. Cesario, the Agile Manifesto has been there for like 20 years. Do you think it's time to give a refresh or create a version 2, or will it work forever, or what do you think about it?
I'm not very enthusiastic about changing that manifesto. I think it was a super moment to write that down. It inspired lots of people. It changed the world of software development, and maybe beyond that, it changed the world too. And it's focused on software development. So and the people who were there, most of them, if not all, were like software developers. So they truly say that, you know, that they are inventing or improving stuff by actually doing it themselves. And, you know, this statement to me is key, right? That, you know, that we have these people helping others, but they help others because, you know, they do it themselves too. It's not just theoretic. So I like that very much. I would not update that. And I think the values are still relevant today as they were 20 years ago. The problems have changed, of course. I experienced even real waterfall. So I think many who just joined like the workforce after 2010, let's say, they probably never experienced that. You know, they know it maybe from books or from history class. So the problems are different, but I think the values there, I would not update them. I would just try to, you know, translate them into the new environment, but not by changing the text, but just by respecting the text and understanding the context in which they actually appeared in 2002 or 3. Yeah, I think that would be better.
That's fair enough. Respecting the text that it actually has right now, but applying it to the actual context of the planet, etc. Right? So that makes a lot of sense. I don't know in that side of the planet, but in here, Agile is like the buzzword all over Latin America, right? Everyone wants to be Agile and every company, but there's a lot of misunderstanding of what Agile is. Many persons in here think that Agile is delivering faster, right? And that's it. Have you seen any misconceptions or anti-patterns in the way they use the way that some consultants or whoever sell the word Agile, right? Have you seen that over there?
Absolutely. A lot of misconceptions, misunderstandings, because of it's already there for so long. So people repeat the message and then it gets diluted after so many years. And many organizations I walk into, and they say we're doing Agile, we need to improve some. But when I enter, I don't recognize anything related to Agile development. You see, I recognize things related to, well, resource utilization or making people work more efficient or making teams working more efficient, like getting things faster, the word you use. But that's not what Agile is about at all. As Agile is much more about being adaptable, being able to welcome change and being ready to react to the change when it comes, which is in many ways opposite to, you know, having teams and people working under full utilization. So these misconceptions happen a lot. Everybody blogs, you know, everybody writes stuff and, you know, and they read stuff that was written by somebody else. So the original message gets diluted a lot. I totally recognize your point of view in Latin America. Yes.
Yeah, great. I'm glad that we're not alone in this one. So it's happening all over the place, right? Regarding, let's jump into Scrum directly, right? So regarding Scrum, you probably have some experience with project management before Scrum appeared, right?
Absolutely.
How has the timeline, you know, your approach to the project timelines have changed from before Scrum to now? How do you see them? What's the relationship? How has it evolved, right?
You know, you mean how I see it or how I see it in companies?
Yeah, how have you seen it in companies, and what's your take, right? Like you join a company, you have a team, and then someone says, hey, we need a timeline for this, right? So how is different from calculating this today from 10 years ago without Scrum, maybe?
Mm-hmm. You know, I've seen more and more companies, which let's say in the early 2000s, I wouldn't see, but let's say last 8 years, 10 years, I see it much more. Companies who don't want any timelines at all, you know.
No, great.
They agree that these teams work as hard as they can, and when these features are done, well, it's when they're done. We don't need any timeline like project management timelines, which are, like, let's say, fixed on a budget or fixed on a scope or fixed on a date. So I see this more and more all over the place in companies that I work with, which I think is a much better approach. Now, I still do see in many large organizations like banks and insurance companies, technical companies like that make, let's say, big hardware, software products combined, that there is this need for timeline. So it's still there, and unfortunately, many times I still see that they plan, for example, things like, what's your rate of estimation versus completion? So did you estimate to get 10 things done in a month? How much did you get actually done in a month? So that would be a KPI. So if you get all 10 done, then you're good. If you get 8 done out of 10, then you're less good, you see. So this is a very predictive approach, like you can predict the future. So it's still the mindset that it's about, making the future predictable, which is rather sad, because this flows into then that they say, well, in 6 months or in 9 months, I want to achieve this business goal. I want to have X more customers or X more revenue or whatever it is. And I know, or at least I fool myself in knowing that to do that, I need this set of functionality. So then it becomes, how can we develop this set of functionality within these 9 months, which is like the same thing as having a fixed date, fixed scope approach. The goal should be, well, we don't know how to get those business results in 6 months. So we have to learn how to do that. Maybe we know the first 2 months what we should do, but after that, we don't know. That's the whole point. We have to learn and then build our future as we go. So this approach of learning as you go, I see that regularly still being a big challenge in large organizations.
Yeah, I agree. Timelines, at least in my experience, is still an issue because I'm still trying to convince C-level to leave the timelines creation to the engineers, right, to the team. And even then, it's not a commitment. It's just an estimation that should evolve, right, unless we don't learn anything, right? So it should be evolving. It's a big challenge for many companies in here. Cesario, how has your view of leadership and management evolved from traditional project management from old days to now with these agile practices, Scrum, Kanban, etc.?
My view on management, right? How did that evolve?
Yeah, management and leadership, right? Both concepts. I think it's important to touch on those.
This is a hard question because we can go so many directions at the moment. In 2002, for example, I was working at a big technical company, a big Dutch technical company. We made silicon discs where people create chips out of, so ICs, and we were doing XP, and so we were doing meetings standing up, and we were using Post-it, which was super revolutionary 21 years ago. And I remember the project manager coming by and say, "Well, what are you guys doing?" I said, "Well, we're doing a meeting standing up." And so I explained that we did planning and with sticky notes and that, and he said, "Well, it's okay, I don't mind if you do your meetings standing up. It's okay. If you want to use sticky notes, well, we can afford that sticky notes, But, as long as everything is delivered according to the plan, you can do whatever you want." So, but it was already there that he understood, let's let these guys, these engineers who know what they're talking about, self-organize, So that was already good. But of course, this project management mindset of, this is what we have to do in time was super there still. So I see that mindset is changing in these let's say, smaller kind of companies. Smaller, I mean, let's say max 1,000 people. But in the larger organization, I still see this project mindset as we discussed just previously, but in a disguised way. So from project management perspective, I see these two differences. But I do see a very large difference in the way people are the leaders, like, let's say, let's call them leaders, operate. So from and that's I see that all over in the places I work, which is mostly Western Europe. And this is a shift from that managers or leaders in, let's say, 20 years ago, they were very much control focused. They would very much like to know when you came into your company, for example. You would have to clock, and then when you went out, you have to clock when you go out, so we know how many hours you were there. And you had to. There was much more a need to have very specific project code. So you have 3 hours on that project and 5 hours on that, so we could actually really track and control what you would do. We would see offices where there were these teams, but management would have a good overview, like they would have offices with big windows so they could see the people. So you could see it everywhere in the organization design and the way policies were set up. And now I see that's completely, let's say, gone. You see, people can sit anywhere, they can work anywhere. They don't have to clock their hours anymore. So there's a lot of leadership is much more about now facilitating and helping and enabling teams to be successful, instead of fearing that they would don't do their job as required. So I see a major change in that, and I think that's a very good change.
You have been talking about many changes and many positive changes. Is there any change that you have seen that it was better in the old days than nowadays, or are we just getting?
Oh, that's a good one. What was better in the older day, in the pre-agile days? Yeah, I think in the pre-agile, what I think was better in the pre-agile days, but this is very locally, so it's only better for the developers, is, well, they didn't have that many meetings. You see, they could just program and do what we liked. And if you were like me, I would like to program because, that's what I studied for. I wanted to do nerd things and not so many group hug things and social things, And so I'm not saying that's better for the overall result of the team or for the overall company, but personally, like from a local optimization perspective, that would be that was more fun for me personally. And I hear lots of developers still complaining about all these meetings and all this stuff that they have to do. But unfortunately, that is because they have all these meetings, and then they use, for example, Scrum, and then they add all those meetings to the meetings that they already had. And then they have even more meetings, you see. And because, that's not what we should do, of course. But, that's what happened.
Yeah, I totally agree. So related to the topic of metrics, right? How have you seen that metrics are evolving? What's your experience with metrics in the companies or customers with whom you have worked with?
Mm-hmm. So this is a very good question, and I often get that question, especially in transformations and also in adoptions, but also in transformations, like, should we measure this? Should we measure that we make progress in our adoption or in our transformation? And which metrics should we use then? Well, should we do a maturity assessment of the teams, maybe, to see how mature they are? And my answer is, well, very unlikely that would be helpful. I even gave it a name. I call it spreadsheet agile adoption, where the agile coaches have this spreadsheet, and there's all these things like, do they have the Scrum board like this, or score 1 to 5? Do they have the daily Scrum like that? Do they have Jira like this? Do they, whatever? Well, and then the agile coaches walk around and, go to the teams and observe, ask questions, and say, no, you're a 3 there, and then these beautiful graphics show up and so on.
Be careful, because I have done that, so I hope that I don't get punished.
It's okay. So it's not very useful. It could be useful. It could be useful if it is only data for the team itself, not to judge, not to mature assess, but for the team, a reflection. They can then take it or not, and they can do whatever they want with it. Then it could be useful, like it is a feedback loop on the process provided by an experienced person. Like the Scrum Master is the feedback loop on Scrum itself. So he could give feedback. Now, if you want to use an Excel for that, that's okay usually. But it becomes useless the moment it becomes like a management tool to, measure progress. For the obvious reason that, you will get conformity with the prescribed process, but you will not get any ownership. and then it will not work. And then if it doesn't work, well, the agile coach has to fix it, and then it doesn't work still. So you don't want to go that way. So I'm very against these kinds of metrics. Now, regarding adoption, I've had many conversations with senior management board people also about how to measure this, right? And almost all of the time we came to the conclusion that the current measures that they have for their services or products, which are business measure, revenue, like, I don't know, market share, I don't know, customer satisfaction. These are just okay. These are perfect. There's no need to change them. So you can still use these business metrics. And then the idea is, well, the assumption is if we are going to be agile, then the assumption is that these metrics will improve. Could be because somebody, a president of the United States, twitters. It could be because, there's a COVID or not. There could be many things. So it's not cause and effect directly. But, the assumption is if we do agile stuff, then these metrics will go up. And at senior management level, this is 99 out of 100 times they say, well, this is true. We don't need any additional metrics. This is what it is. And then it boils down to, do we need any specific metrics to, to measure if we are doing agile in the right way? Now, and we just talked about that before. This is dangerous in my opinion, super dangerous if you use that to judge and to say, well, you're not mature and you're mature and so on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that you need to use wisely your metrics, right? And if they generate some action items to improve in any way something about the team, then they make sense. But I think that we are coming from a time when management just wanted to have 20 metrics every single, month, and no one actioned that, right? Those didn't trigger anything, but these guys to see that everything looks good, and that's it, right? So I agree with you. I think that it should be focused on the business metrics rather than performance measuring the team.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
And these business metrics are already there. You see, you can just reuse them. And the last thing I want to say about this, so agile is not the goal. Okay, so if you measure, then you probably will move in that direction. But agile is not the goal. So
I agree.
And then we have agile coaches that form into a group in large, at least in Western Europe. They form into this agile coaching group, and it can be 100 agile coaches in large companies. And they have this director that is board -1, reports directly into the boardroom. But then they are creating this new local optimization, right? So what are they going to do? Well, we are going to do agile. We are here, and then we have metrics. You need metrics for agile because this is our department, and then they go to the teams and say, you have to be close to the customer, and you have to work with the customer, but we work far away from the customer in our own department. So this is ironic, I would say. I hope I'm not offending anybody, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's good. That works. Thank you. So Cesario, regarding the PMO, right? What is your vision about it? Have you been in companies where they have disappeared the PMO, they have evolved it? Do you see these traditional and agile methodologies or frameworks or whatever coexisting for the coming years, or do you see one of them, like taking the place on another one? What's your view around the traditional PMO in the companies where you have been?
Mm-hmm. So I have a strong opinion on that. First is, agile development. So the way I mean it, the way I talk about it is it's for solving these things called more complex problems, right? Problems of innovation, problems of, I don't know how to get there exactly, so I have to learn a lot. And it's like, there's maybe lots of people involved, and these people are interdependent, so that adds to the complexity. Now, many work in large organizations is not of that type. So if you do agile or not there, well, I don't know if that's a good idea. Maybe there are other traditional methods which are much better, and I'm convinced they are, for non-complex problems. So no need to do agile there at all. You see? So, and if you then need to do projects there in that type of work, well, projects are excellent. It's predictable. Well, you just have to analyze, study, make a prediction and be on time, on plan, and on budget. Which is, well, it's like that. You have to make hamburgers. Well, no need to do Scrum, just make hamburgers, man. It's that simple. Now, the other type of work, like the work we usually talk about, there is no need for a PMO anymore in most of the cases. Why not? Because once you identify your product or your service, which is a real product or a real service, like it has a profit and loss statement, you see, so you actually make money of it. So then it becomes a product management, a product investment decision, which is board level, maybe board -1 level. How much do I want to invest in this product this year or the next years, or you see? And you don't need a project management office like doing project portfolio management, because these products are large. You eliminate this self-inflicted wound, actually, as we like to call it, of project portfolio management. There is no projects because, we allocate money to product. And what the product group then does with the money, well, that's up to the product group. That's why we have this director of product A and director of product B and so on. So in that context, it's silly to have a project management office because there is no project. And if you have projects, probably the case is that your product definitions are too narrow, that you then have to, fund different initiatives. But if you take a step back, you will notice that these initiatives all belong to product A and these belong all to product B, and it's an investment decision.
Got it. Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you. Another topic. Do you think, or do you consider that Agile has devalued the importance of documentation, or what's your take?
I don't think that Agile has devalued it. I think that people doing Agile have devalued it. Yes, that I do believe, because it's Agile, it's cowboy, it's like guitar playing, beach, drinking, programming. Well, let's relax, kick back, and don't do the documentation because that's boring. Yeah, I don't think that's what Agile is about, of course, but I think that's how many people like to implement. And it was the same probably before Agile, that people didn't like documentation, but then it was forced. You have to do it. You see. So I don't think it's because of. I don't think it's inherent to Agile not have documentation. I think it's inherent to Agile to eliminate the unnecessary documentation, which there was a lot of.
Yeah.
So that we don't need anymore, and that's Agile thinking helps get rid of those documents. Yeah.
That's fair. That's good. Okay. Related to risk management, I often get the question of, "Hey, Hector, we used to do a lot of risk manager over here. The PMO used to do it, the project manager, and now we don't have a single risk just because we're doing Scrum." And I'm like, well, I know what to answer, right? But what's your take on this? What's your point of view? How would you answer to this concern from mid-managers?
I would answer that the risks are still the same, and I would answer that you still have to think about risks a lot and put that into your plan. The plan is now just called differently, and the risks are now addressed differently. So we have to have some context here. So let's say that it's a product group that delivers a banking product, and there's a person who is responsible for this banking product. So if the banking product doesn't produce, that person is responsible. So this person would surely want to mitigate and think about risk. Nobody needs to tell that person that, So there's risk thinking, traditional risk management, if you want to use that word, going on and should be going on. Now, the way we address it, of course, is different, which is, of course, I think obvious for Agile listeners. We don't ignore reality for too long a period. So we just touch back on reality frequently, like value risk. Are we making stuff that are actually solving problems for our users? We want to validate that early on, as fast as we can. Well, that reduces risk. Can our teams actually deliver it within an acceptable time frame? Well, we want to learn about that early on. So we want to have done stuff. How much stuff can we get really, really done in one iteration? Well, this gives a much better risk assessment of progress than, well, I have 3 documents done, you see. Investment risk, I'm investing all this money at once. No, you don't need to invest all this money at once. Instead, don't give me 1 million, give me 50,000, and I will do the highest risk item and learn about that. And then report on that, discuss that, and then based on that, we can make another investment. So this iterative approach is all about, it's built in. the risk reduction. We're just trying to get the information earlier to then make appropriate decisions about them. But we still have to know what these risks are. This is still equally valid.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for sharing. So you have met or worked with many Scrum teams, I believe, right? And you have seen teams that seem to be doing a good version of Scrum, teams that think that they are doing a better version of Scrum than what you see from the outside, right? So I'm interested. My interest right now is to talk about those anti-patterns that are really hard to notice, right, as a Scrum team, because there are the classic ones. Hey, you're not doing the correct sprint reviews. I mean, you're not getting the feedback correctly, or you're ignoring your action items from the retrospectives. Those classic ones. But what anti-patterns would be the hard ones to notice in case there are persons looking at these videos saying, oh, I didn't know that was not correct, or maybe I'm falling in this, right?
Okay. Oh wow, there could be so many. So I don't know. So this depends a lot on your level of working in the company. So one obvious, I think it's an obvious one, is we have this team, and this team works off let's say they do Scrum, and they have this thing called the sprint backlog. And then they have all these tasks, but these tasks have names on them, Maybe they use Jira, and Jira has names on tasks or columns of people, like Hector has task B and Cesario has task A. Well, this is nonsense. You see, it's not Hector's task, it's not Cesario's task, it's our task, and we should pick it up. And this is so naturally supported by tooling, for example, that it evolves into, we have this sprint backlog, but not really. What we really have is a Hector backlog, Hector sprint backlog, and a Cesario sprint backlog, and a person X sprint backlog. So we are actually working on our own stuff, just creating local single points of bottleneck. You see, we are not focusing at all on being a team. We are not even a team. Hector can be successful because all his tasks are done, but Cesario not. He's unsuccessful because his tasks are not done. So this concept of being a team, scratching each other's back, learning more than one skill so that the team wins, being able to, sacrifice, let's use a very strong word, your personal expertise so that you work on something that you're less good at, but the team wins. This is a fundamental, I don't like the word anti-pattern, but I'll use it because it's your show, a fundamental anti-pattern.
Okay.
That would be one that I can see most often. Yeah. Which is, if you can fix that, that will give you enormous increase in morale, in team camaraderie, in happiness, and in performance.
Yeah, I heard one quick story about this, the topic you're talking about, related to if a team is collaborating and creating something, if when you see the end result, you're able to see this is Cesario's work, this is Hector's work, then you didn't collaborate at all. It should be in a way that you're not able to identify which part was done by each of them, right? So that's kind of a tip over there. So
because we did it together, right? Because we did it together.
Yeah, it should be one thing, all of them, right? So okay, thank you for sharing. I think that's a really good one, and it's hidden over there, right? It's not too obvious, so that's great. So related to hybrid agile frameworks, what's your take on this? So let's see that you come into a customer, they are, I don't know, they have 10 Scrum teams, and they are asking you, Cesario, please, we need to scale Scrum. We have a lot of dependencies. We need something that will help us, to collaborate better between the teams, not work in silos. The software is very related. It's a monolith. It's not microservices or whatever. So we need to find a way to scale or to work collaboratively better between the teams. Do you look at the actual frameworks and try to pick up some stuff that works for each of them? Or do you like to say, I think we should put Nexus over here? What's your approach into these challenges?
I'm just thinking about how to react to this. I think that, so let me take one take and then I'll give another take. So one take is, so I always wonder, how can you know the answer, before understanding the question? So how do you know that, we're going to do Nexus or less or whatever, Kanban? Well, we don't understand the problem yet. So I would never do anything like that. For me, this would be embarrassing. It would be if a consultant comes into my company and says, well, you should do less, I say, well, get out of here, you see.
Yeah.
So I would first study the dynamics. So what's going on here? You see, well, how are these dependencies between teams? What are the types of dependencies the teams have? Are these sequential dependencies, reciprocal dependencies, for example? Where is if we need to develop features for this big monolithic product, right? Let's take 20 or let's say 50 features that we just developed last 5 months, and let's study how this impacted the team. So which teams are required most often, which teams are required less often. So I would take all that kind of data to then come up with, okay, what would be the best configuration, or the best, so it would be a good configuration of teams or team reconfigurations to address the work that we have most of. And it's nothing to do with frameworks yet. It's just about studying, showing respect to the teams and understanding, helping them understand how the work is working for them. So once you have that in place, the dependencies, how they do integration, maybe they have 17 feature branches. Of course, well, no, that would be a big problem. You see, maybe they have all these component teams, and they work all out of sync because of branches, because of 17 product backlogs. So this could be all kinds of reasons, but I first want to know, how does the work? So where are the hotspots? Where are the bottlenecks? How are the dependencies? And then I would start looking at these things like branches and backlogs and management's role, team product owners or not, and these kinds of things. And then from that I would say, okay, this is what I see. This is what I created with you together. So you recognize all these data, you recognize all these issues together, and I would build it from there. And if the teams then would then say, well, I think for us the best is to do Kanban, well, who am I to argue with the people who actually do the work every day?
That's good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. First, understanding everything going on, empirism, right? Going through some data for what has happened before, and then start the conversation about what can be a possible solution, right? So focusing on understanding what's going on makes total sense.
I want to add something.
Yeah,
I want to
please.
add something to that. I think that's important. So in large scale, people think it's about team autonomy. So if I have 20 teams, then we're going to go really fast if they're all autonomous. This is false. If they are autonomous, they will go really fast, each in their own direction. That's true. But if they are part of the same product group, this is not what you want. You don't want autonomous, independent teams if they all work on the same group. So they must reduce autonomy because they work in a larger group. So they must be less autonomous. And they must be strongly dependent, not loosely dependent. Because if you want to change direction at a larger group, it's easier if everybody is dependent upon each other. Because then if one changes, the others must change too. If they're autonomous, then you can change, Hector. Okay, you go. I still go my way. You see? So this maybe it's hard to grasp in these 20 seconds, but it's a important thing to think about and maybe for the listeners to read more about.
Yeah, no, that's a great eye opener. At least for me, it was like I have never seen that picture the way that you're describing it, right? And it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, thank you. That was a great input. Okay. So Cesario, like 2 weeks ago, I got in a project with a customer, and I was trying to be an agile coach, right, for them. The way that I was trying to understand what was going on, how could I help them, right? And they were starting with Scrum. They had started doing Scrum a few months ago, and I was there to try to say what you just described about, well, how are you doing? Where can I help, right? I didn't have an Excel, right? So don't punish me.
Very good.
Yeah. So, but the thing is that I was talking, I saw that there was some resistance, right? 2 or 3 members of one of the teams, the one that have been there for more than 10 years, was very resistant to everything that I said, right? Whatever I said, you're crazy, Hector, right? Talking about Agile, Scrum, like we were trying to help them understanding how to estimate in story points. These guys were like, I don't care about you, your story points, your Agile, Scrum, whatever. I have been programming this platform for the last 10 years, and I'm top of the industry. This is a gaming platform, and they are number one in what they do, right? So I was like, okay, so how can you, I don't know if it's sell is the word, but how can you, I don't know if convince is the word, or how do you do your job as an Agile coach if there's a lot of resistance within some of the teammates, right? What would be your tips, or how would you try to approach this challenge?
Mhm. So this is a very good question, actually, very good one. And when I was coaching, I don't do coaching anymore. I just do consulting now. But when I was coaching, I think that it is super important, and I always did that, is to show respect to the team. I think that's where it starts, and it starts with human connection. It starts with just showing respect, getting to know them, introducing yourself, listening, talking about you and about their work, and what is good about their work, what are their challenges, what problems do they have, what good things are there, what pressures do they have, just to, get this human connection. And then in the meanwhile, you also introduce and talk about the pressures and the good things and the bad things and the goals of the people who pay their salary, you see. So it could be that, they don't have this problem, but the person who pays their salary or their report or another team it's not necessarily only the one who pays their salary, but could be other persons who do have a problem, which is related to them, which is related to how they work, or which depends on how they perform, or which could be better if they did something differently. So I would go to the root of talking to them, showing respect, and bringing to the top, making it clear what are the challenges or the problems that we are trying to solve here as the larger organization, and so that could be problems that they don't really directly have, but there could also be problems that they do have. Maybe they don't like to be pressured and have to do estimates in stories, and they're bored with that. I don't know. Could be. So and then make that the story that you are there for, to help them with, and management with, and the other teams with, and everybody with. So I would take it like from that angle. So it becomes like you reach into their inner emotions, like that, being a person. You're actually creating empathy. That's what you're trying to create. And then once they recognize, okay, I understand, that I don't have a problem. I am top of the world, but these other teams, I'm just making up an example. Yeah, these other teams, they don't understand my code or whatever, and yeah, it's hard for them. They work until 10 in the evening, and I go home at 8. Then maybe they say, oh, this is a problem. Well, maybe I should do some story points, because it doesn't help me, but it helps my colleagues, or it helps somebody else. Could be something like that. I'll take it. Would be my approach.
That's a good advice. Empathy, right? Empathy will help a lot. I agree. Okay. Cesario, could you share with the audience and with me one success or achievement that you're very proud of during your career? Something that you brag about, or that you say, I'm very happy because I did this with this in this project or whatever. And then also a big failure, if you want to share with us, like, I learned this big lesson and it was hard, right? Oh,
yeah. So I've been doing this for many years, so it should be a recent one. A recent one is a big bank, and they were doing Spotify. Probably heard about that. And they were top of the notch. They would say, well, we are really good. We are worldwide top in Agile banking. And some director saw me at a conference speak, and we got in touch, and he asked me to come over to have a look at one of his tribe, as they call it in Spotify language. And And I noticed lots of stuff which was, like very autonomous teams. And I think there were 23 teams in one tribe. And let's keep it short. It had a lot of agile, let's say, wording. It did a lot of good agile things. But, being able to react as a group and change direction as a group and, making progress and delivering stuff reliably and so on. That part of agility, like the important part, was not there. So what we did there is I did a study, a GOSI, as I just told you before in the previous question, and we came up with the idea to do a less implementation there. So large-scale Scrum framework, and we did that. It was a multi-country tribe, even over 3 countries, and it was so cool that then I invited the director of the product and an area product owner and the technical lead also of the whole group, and we gave a keynote at the München LESS conference about this. So this was super cool. It was super cool because these were wonderful people to work with, and it was a very enjoyable experience, and the results were also super cool that we could actually improve on the Spotify model, which is should not be a surprise.
Yeah, now you got me questioning, like, before jumping to the failures, this was the great story, the good one, but I have some questions. So what did LESS fix that Spotify didn't work with in this context? Like, what got better with LESS than was not working out with Spotify?
So lots of things. For example, teams. It's not about autonomy. They realize that it's not about team autonomy. It's about how the teams are tuned. It's about how they are reacting to each other, how they collaborate together. That's one thing that came from the LESS adoption. Another thing came.
We could say that LESS divides a little less, with the tribes and the chapter. It adds a layer, right, to the implementation. So LESS is more flat in the way they move around. We say that?
Yeah. So so for autonomy would be okay. Let's dive into more specifics. So it was 23 teams, I think, or 24, and each had its own product backlog. Okay. So we eliminated that. So now we had 9 teams working off a single product backlog. So per definition, they now have less autonomy. You see?
Yeah. Something like the Nexus promotes also. Yeah.
So they have less autonomy. They all work off the same product backlog. They also have a shared sprint planning. They all have one shared sprint review and so on. So there's much less autonomy, for example. So that was one thing that a big change. So we had all these team product owners. They were called squads, right? And the squads have a product owner and so on. So after that, we didn't have team product owners anymore. We just have one product owner for 9 teams. You see, that was, wow, how about losing autonomy? How about creating focus? How about teams knowing, syncing, being dependent upon each other to work, for example, and so on. Yeah, there were many things. But the audience can read the paper and they can see the keynote. It's all public. This is all a public story. That's why I can talk about it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
and we have 8 product owners saying, we got fired thanks to CESARIO.
No, they didn't. So this was a decision, and the decision was: should we tell them that this role does no longer exist? So not the person, the role, or shouldn't we tell them? And these are 2 options you can take, and I always share these 2 options. And the option was taken: well, we leave the role. We leave the role, but we take away the product backlog.
Okay.
So after 1 sprint, all of them voluntarily said, "Well, this doesn't make any sense. We don't want this role anymore."
Okay.
So what I say
still stayed in the company, right? I was joking with the fire.
Yes, of course. They got promotion. They were
nice.
Promoted to team member. So now they were just part of the team. And their expertise was, requirements engineering, understanding the process a lot. So they played a very strong role still in testing, in refinement, they would take the lead in if teams would talk to users, they would take the lead there. But they were part of a team. They were not an in-between anymore. They would not write user stories anymore. They were just a team member. It was a much better use of their intellect.
Well, that sounds like a great outcome. Now tell me the big failure and the big lesson.
The big failure and the big lesson. I've had many failures, unfortunately, but I remember one which is close by. So I will just talk about that. And that's the reason why I don't do coaching anymore.
Oh, really?
I only do consulting.
Okay.
So I've been getting as you get older, I'm getting older. I have less patience. Okay, so I was doing a less adoption at a company, about 300 people in the group, and the discussion was, well, how long does this take? So how long do you need to prepare? Do the go see? And what we talked about in the previous questions, right? Show respect and so on. And I say, well, it takes between 3 and 6 months to get to a point where we can redesign the organization, redesign the teams, and do a less adoption in this case. And the CEO said, no, it's too long. I need it in 6 weeks. And I said, well, I can do it in 6 weeks. Well, I will try. He said, well, I insist. And I said, well, I got overconfident. I said, well, I can do it in 6 weeks. I'll do it in 6 weeks. So I rushed a lot of stuff. I didn't show respect enough. I didn't prepare enough. I didn't study enough. I made too many assumptions. And then it didn't take 6 weeks. It took maybe 10 weeks or so, but much too short. And then the day came that we would want to do it, and we did it, and it was, everything went wrong. People were upset. People left the company. I was blamed, of course, which is a good thing. I get paid for being blamed, and it was a horrible experience, which ended in disaster. Yeah. And the main reason, of course, was it was too fast. I didn't listen enough to the teams. I didn't take it time enough to show respect and to build this thing with them together. And this is a very. It was a lesson I already had learned, but it's like a donkey. You see, you make the same mistake twice. I hope not 3 times. Yeah. And in this case, so I think people often, it depends on where you work most of your time, but people, I often get the idea that people think that management is the problem in adoptions. But it's not the case. Management, senior up until the board, many times say we want this, but then the teams don't want it. The biggest problem is the teams, not the management, in my work environment. And in this case, it was management. Yeah, it was me who was not showing respect.
Okay, thank you for sharing, and I'm sure that we can all learn from that experience. Thank you. So Cesario, if you could have dinner with any influential Agile figure, is there someone you would like to have a good conversation with at dinner, some beers? Like, do you admire someone very much and you would like to talk first?
Yes, of course. So in 2004 or something, I started the course by Ken Swaber, which was, world changing. And then in 2010 or 11, he invited me to become a trainer in Scrum.org. He just started Scrum.org. And the way he communicates, right, the way, the way he is, I think it's very inspirational. And to me, he is with a capital T, the master. So I haven't seen him for many years now, as he is retired and so on. So if I could have a dinner with somebody, I would have it with him. Yeah, in the Agile community.
Nice. And that probably, if you can invite me, I will be glad to go with you too.
Yes.
Okay. We're almost there. I have 2 or 3 more questions, Cesario. Thank you for your time again.
So your questions are super interesting, very different than all the other interviews I gave. Yeah, very different.
That's
like
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. So how do you apply in your day-to-day, the Agile principles, the frameworks that you have learned, the practices? Like, is there some things that as you have studied more and more about Agile, you see, oh, I'm reflecting this in my life, and I probably didn't do it on purpose, right? I mean, I'm not talking about I want to, lose, I don't know, 10 kilograms and then I apply Scrum with, no. The kind of things that you just suddenly are applying them. Like, I don't know, in my case, I think that my relationship with my wife has improved a lot because I try to apply some of the principles, right? So
good for you, man.
Do you have, yeah. Do you have some more examples like that, maybe?
Wow. Yeah, well, not your example, but I don't want to talk about that. Yeah, so I think I raised my children by asking lots of questions. So I noticed that it's just my nature. It became my nature. I don't tell them. I just ask questions.
So you're still coaching, but not the companies, your children now.
Yeah, my children, one is 17 now and one is 14 almost. But I still do that. I did that from the beginning, like, so, and the teachers always said, well, these guys have their own opinion, and they always question everything, yeah, because that's how I raised them. So that's one thing I reflected on this before, which I think changed. And another thing that just came to mind is my approach to problems. So if it's not a problem at the moment, it's not a problem I'm having right now. I seriously doubt and I seriously challenge in my daily life, in my family life. If it's a problem worth solving at the moment, should we solve it later? What about the problems we have right now? You see, so things that could happen in 3 weeks or in 2 months. Well, that's not the last moment at the moment. So let's focus. That I think that mindset is there. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. So there are many Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, consultants looking at this video. Hopefully, someone else. So, or at least 2 or 3 persons, maybe. So these persons would like to maybe know, how do you keep learning, right? You have a great career. You have provided a lot of value to many persons in your life. How do you prepare for that, right? How do you keep constantly learning? Do you like podcasts, books? I don't know. If you could maybe suggest or give some tips to the ones that are starting in this Agile journey.
Oh, wow. The ones that are starting. Wow, that's a difficult one. So I can just talk a little bit about what I do. So I like to read books a lot. I don't like to read blogs. I like books, and I like sources that are known sources. So I don't like to that people that I can look up and see that they have credentials, that they actually know what they're talking about. It's not persons that did one thing once and then they have an opinion. So I try to avoid opinions and look for, if I would read Hector, I would say, well, can I find 3 people who say the same thing that Hector said, or similar things, or that support Hector? Well, and then let's read Hector. Now he has credibility. So I prefer that kind of learning. And I prefer, of course, also to ask questions to myself. So, they want to do a release train, or they want to do, feature team. And then I ask questions. So what would that mean? So how would they then organize the team? How would then, the teams integrate the code? How would they align? So I would ask all of these kinds of questions until I find a question that is not answered, and then that I will study, and then that would be can be a source for writing an article or for sharing at a conference. So in that way, I come to things that are not many people have not thought about yet. Of course, a lot of them already have, but let's say the majority haven't thought about it, because otherwise I would know it. You see.
Nice.
So, and then these questions are interesting. And then, if you do that, you will learn stuff with other people, lots of other people don't know yet. And you become an interesting source of stuff, of information.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. The last thing, Cesario, could you share maybe with the audience, what are you up to now? Are you writing more books? Are you creating some trainings? Are you, I know that you're consulting, you mentioning. So if you could share what you're doing and how can they keep up with you if someone wants to follow you. Do you have Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn? Where would they be able to find you in what you're doing?
Mm-hmm. Very, very good. Yeah. So we launched this last book, Creating Agile Organizations. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to build a product out of that. So we have a website, creatingagileorganizations.com, which has a lot of blogs and papers and experience reports. And we're building a trainer community around that. We have 4 trainers already. It has 2 different courses, the 2-day Designing Agile Organizations course, which is the first part of the book, and a 3-day Coaching Agile Organizations course, which is very practical for coaches wanting to lead transformations and so on. So I'm very enthusiastic about that. There is a LinkedIn group for that, Creating Agile Organizations, so you can follow that if you want.
You will put it in the description. Yeah.
Experience reports are added there. When we blog, it's added there. Courses are added there if you want to check them out. Next to that, there is the Scrum Club LinkedIn group, which is about the second book. People talk about all these Scrum patterns. This is for Scrum Masters that work with teams. Very practical. How about we talk about solving problems there at team level using patterns and so on. So that's a thing you can check out too if that's interesting to you. Yeah, you can follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn. I regularly write and post on things related to creating agile organizations and Scrum. Yeah.
Well, you know where to follow Cesario now, and we will put all the information in the description of this video when I publish it. So, Cesario, that's all I have. I really appreciate the time. I think it was a great, very interesting conversation. You shared a lot of stuff that I'm sure that everyone looking at this video will really enjoy and would also learn a lot from. So thank you for your time, and maybe we can have another session soon. No?
Great. I really enjoyed your questions. Very, very cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great night and rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, man.
Bye-bye.